Awesome. Okay. I think we're mostly in good shape here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, let me just thank everyone. I mean, you're choosing to spend your evening here. And, your time is really valuable. All of our time is valuable. So thank you first for being here. I will do my best to make this worth your while. And as 𝒔𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒕 said, I do encourage you, anything that's kind of top of mind, burning questions, whatever, you can certainly put them in the chat. If there's something that we have to address before we move on, like, oh, I'm stuck on this basic thing doesn't make sense, then I'll jump to it right away. And if there's some things that maybe could wait, then we'll do that instead. Oh, wow. Big commitment, Australia. Awesome. So I've given this talk several times this year, and this talk is really uniting two passions that I have. One passion around leadership coaching and leadership development, which I think is so huge. Organizations can only be as successful as their leaders. And often, I think a lot of us in this agile space and beyond that, really, we're in the change business. And one of the things that gets neglected a lot is that the leaders also need to change. So this talk is really kind of uniting leadership coaching and development along with OKRs and that shared purpose, both of which I find to be incredibly powerful, but done together is like a superpower. So let's dive right in. All right, so we start with OKRs, just kind of a quick primer. I once heard somebody talk about OKRs and describe them as dreams with deadlines. And I thought, that's beautiful. Because I think OKRs done well aren't just business as usual. You're really focused on outcomes that matter, right? Making an impact and the things that really ignite people's passion and purpose to get something powerful done. And so I like that definition of it. I also see OKRs as a goal-setting framework that allow you to set ambitious goals, ideally, with measurable results. So there's a bit of accountability and a bit of inspiration mixed into OKRs. So let's look at an example, because I don't know who's working with OKRs or what they look like. So let's look at one together. One of my favorite things with OKRs is to combine them with product teams, product managers in areas, really have a customer focus. So if you imagine a product that sells things to customers online, they allow customers to make digital payments, they could get feedback from a customer that says, hey, this is hard to do. They could look at their analytics and data and say, people keep dropping off in the middle of this, what's going on? And at the end of the day, they might determine the most important thing for us to do is to make digital payments more convenient. So why not make that a focus? Make that a quarterly goal, an OKR, make that your objective. But then the question becomes, how do you know they're more convenient? How would you prove that? And so we need some key results here to measure this. Before we move on, let me just highlight that you want them to kind of start with a verb, right? Some kind of action-oriented, like, let's go do this, let's go take that hill, something kind of directional, inspirational, short, clear, memorable. And then when we talk about how do we test that it's more convenient, we set some ideas on what good looks like using data. So here we say, you know what, if we could reduce the time it takes customers to complete a payment by 80%, that'd be huge. We should do that, right? And we know average time it takes them to complete it today. And then we have this other idea. What if we double the number of people that don't have to pay at all? I mean, they don't have to pay manually. It just happens automatically. So let's double the number of people enrolled in autopay. And if we do these two things, we're going to consider ourselves wildly successful. We're going to say, yes, digital payments are more convenient. And so OKRs have gained in popularity over the last few years, and seemingly they're everywhere. And just like with Agile, people have a very mixed experience with it. And so I find it's important not to just do them and not to just do them well, but also to understand what are you trying to achieve with them? And there are a lot of different benefits you'll read out there from books, such as Measure What Matters, or Radical Focus by Christina Wadke, or any number of articles, websites, etc. But I like to distill it down to these three things. OKRs help you focus. What is the most important thing? Because often you run into people that you ask them how they're doing, and they say they're busy. Well, busy doesn't always mean you know what's most important, right? It feels kind of frantic. You're running around like a crazy person, and you may not be concentrating, right? The effort that you put into things. And so OKRs can help provide focus by making a decision on what's important. And then secondly, once you've brought that focus then on making an impact. What's the impact we want to make? What would be huge, right? If we do this, what's going to be possible? And then the third thing that I love about OKRs, and I find this to be just a perfect marriage with Agile and Scrum or Kanban, is OKRs should offer insights. They shouldn't just be lagging numbers that you kind of don't get any data on throughout the course of a quarter. If it's a quarterly OKR, you want some information that you can glean, let's say every 2 weeks or so, or maybe every month. But you need at least a few checkpoints in here that help you make better decisions. And so there's a lot of power in OKRs, but they don't come for free. And so while I typically don't put a lot of slides with tons of words, that's not my favorite, it does require a lot of different changes. And so you can read here a number of different things that they need to support a vision and a strategy. So if you don't have a vision and a strategy, you're going to get very limited value out of OKRs. Certainly, as I show at the top, you can start by retrofitting the work you're already doing. I think that's a perfect way to start with OKRs because people in organizations are already doing important work. And it makes sense to layer in OKRs to say, okay, how would we define success here? And how can we measure that we're getting success? And how might we change the way we're working towards this goal that gives us more insights and regularly? And so a lot has to change around planning and execution. Often, if these are big, ambitious goals, you can't just do them in isolation. You often need other people to agree to help with them. And so you need full commitment and buy-in from the people in your own organization and often others. And so there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot that goes into this, and OKRs require change. But where does the change need to happen? Well, the change certainly needs to happen by the people that are embracing the OKRs, that are authoring them, and so on. But also leadership must change. And this was one of the big lessons from years of working with OKRs, is that this needs to be part of the rollout. That for change initiatives like OKRs to be successful, leadership must also change. And so, we look at how do leaders get to where they are? What does it mean to be a leader? So let's take a few moments to kind of hit this before we find the combination of these two things. So I'll give you a second to read this on your own. And when you're done, maybe just say so in the chat. Okay. Thoughts on this as a definition for leaders? Would you want to work for this person if they met this criteria? Perfect. Thank you, John. So, it's really, when you're in a leadership position, it's really about other people. But it's hard. There's a whole journey that goes with being a leader. In fact, most people don't start there, right? You start in a leadership position when you're rewarded for being really highly skilled at something. And then you're given additional responsibility. Well, that changes the game. But when you're in this position, whether a new leader, or maybe you just kind of kept going, right? You kept climbing the ladder, but you kept hanging on to what was familiar to you. You're going to react to situations in ways that you know well. But because your situations are different, your responsibilities are different as a leader, you're going to have to bring some new things to be successful. You're going to have to change. So there are a lot of ways that leaders can change to support OKR growth. And really, when we're talking about OKRs, we're talking about running the business, right? We're talking about supporting strategy for the organization, strategy at a product level, strategy for the company. And so this is wildly important, right? If you want to stay in business, if you want to thrive, if you want to have healthy organizations, you need to embrace OKRs and be good at them. And so I identified 3 ways that I think leaders can really grow while they're adopting OKRs, right? And help them succeed using them and supporting their strategies. The first is to shift from tactics to strategy. So many leaders at all kinds of levels tend to embrace tactics and stay with them. They're kind of easier to understand, they're easier to ask about, but that shift to strategy is really important. So we'll get into that. 2, almost every organization measures engagement, and typically they want to raise it, right? And we've had a lot of things happen with remote work, with the pandemic, all sorts of things in the political landscape, climate change, all sorts of things that have happened that have caused engagement to go down. And so people bringing their best selves to work is critically important for having successful companies, successful people, successful organizations. And then last but not least is really gaining alignment with peers and direct reports. And so that last piece is really important because leaders have to step into a particular space to understand if they have alignment. And there's a lot of discipline that goes through how you test for that with your people. So, shifting from tactics to strategy and OKR setting. So when your focus is on work and tactics, the OKRs you get tend to look like this. So let me just poll you guys. I'd appreciate if you could type in the chat. Are you using OKRs at your organization? Okay. Okay. All right, cool. So if this is your first introduction to this, let's talk about this. So this is I would call this a tactical, and we'll say qualitative because there's no numbers in this, okay? And so this one says integrate broadcast API into program offers. This is based on a real team and a real goal that they had. And I've kind of changed it up just a little bit to sort of protect the innocent. But it's a fine objective, right? If that's what they want to do, they want to make this happen. But where we get into trouble here and where things are very tactical is this just looks like work, business as usual. So they say, well, you know, our key results are that the broadcast integration is enabled in the program view. Well, you don't need OKRs to do that. You can put that on a project plan. You could have a release plan that says that you intend to do that. You could have a feature around broadcast integration in a backlog somewhere. So you could use these other things. There's really no point in having OKRs. And so the real question is, when this integration is enabled, how do you know it's successful? How do you know it's going to help? Right? What does success look like? And the same thing is true for these others. If you enable integration for tracking customer deals and actions, great. What do you want to learn about customer deals and actions? What are you going to do as a result of learning about that data? What do you hope to be able to do? And those are the things that you really need to measure, right? Because there's a strategy behind this. And the strategy is, you know, the broadcast API is important to the strategy, but we can't tell what the strategy is. And so we really want OKRs that support strategy. So if our thinking is tactical, our OKRs tend to look like this. And you will see this a lot in places where OKRs are new. You will see things that look exactly like this. And so you want to do better. But this is fairly normal. And so this place where leadership starts, if you've ever seen this before, there's a book called Leadership Agility by Bill Joyner and Stephen Joseph. So there's a whole model here that talks about leadership maturity, agile leadership maturity. And in it, they have a few stages. Not all of them are pictured here, but there's enough. And 55% of the people are in this expert space, right? They're domain experts. They have great knowledge, right? They're probably seen as incredibly smart people, very, very talented, very smart, described. Maybe people ask for their input a lot on things. They come up with great solutions, all these things. So people often start here in this expert space, and the majority of people, majority of leaders are in this tactical or workspace. So what we find, like I was saying, is that the best use of OKRs is when they support strategy. So what is strategy? It's almost like this mythical animal, or that's this word that gets tossed around sometimes, but I'm not sure we always have a clear definition, right? When people say strategy, we may all think separate things. So here's a few things to consider. It's an intent rather than a plan. So sometimes people use the word strategic planning, and often what they mean is more detailed planning for a longer horizon. But we want to look at what's the intent. You could also look at it as an approach to achieve an outcome. So this is our approach. There could be other approaches we could take, but we're choosing this one. This is our strategy. And so behind this, there's some kind of hypothesis we can test. And this is important when you're using OKRs. There's a great article. I wish I could remember the name of the fellow, but he writes a lot about strategy. And the article talks about answering 2 questions for strategy. Where will you play and how will you win? And OKRs, 𝒔𝒕𝒓𝒂𝒕𝒊𝒄𝒔 alluded to this. He says that you add a 3rd question for OKRs, which is how will you know you have won? And so this becomes really powerful as you're starting to think about strategy and you're starting to think about OKRs. It's intention, it's approach, it's a hypothesis test, right? And OKRs are there to let you know if you're winning or not. And if you're not, change directions, right? Adapt to what you see. Maybe choose a different strategy. Maybe the problem is in execution, not sure. What we often see with OKRs is, especially through levels of leadership, there's a tendency to cascade them down. So the top level first comes up with their OKRs and then they hand it down to the bottom level. Bottom level accepts whatever the top level gave them. And often they're not thinking about their own area and how they contribute. They're more looking to kind of check the box. Well, we're already planning to do this other work. This is all nice and well and good. We're going to try to map the stuff we're already planning to do to this, but it may not be real. We're just going to do it because people said we have to. And so what's missing a lot of times is our different levels of an organization understanding that they all have a role to play in strategy. Strategy doesn't just come from a pie. Certainly there's broader corporate strategies, but there should also be strategies at product level, at product family level, let's say, if you've got groups of products, a larger organization. Strategy can happen at multiple levels, and this is really important. So if leaders aren't thinking in this way, they miss an opportunity to devise their own strategy and see where it's either connected or disconnected from strategies at other levels. And you can have much better conversations and come up with much better decisions if you do that and come with that frame of mind. And so what we want is that strategy is cohesive. They need to kind of fit together. There could be exceptions, like a group may decide that they have kind of an isolated strategy and they don't fit into the greater whole. But by and large, they need to be somewhat cohesive. And so the scope, would be sort of how broad is this, is this thing, and the time horizon. So the higher we go up through an organization, the longer the OKR should be. So the strategy, the corporate strategy should be like a multi-year strategy at the highest levels of the company. And then as you get down to, let's say, a product team level, I would expect more like quarters. And then maybe at a product family or organization level, annual strategies. And so all of these things need to somehow fit together, but it's important that each person sees their part of strategy to have a better discussion. And so the power in this is that you can create options and hypotheses. If you have a strategy, you have an approach, you have an intention, well, great. What does that look like for an OKR? In this case, the OKR example I gave you earlier, we said make digital payments more convenient. And we knew that if we double the number of accounts enrolled in autopay and we reduce the time to complete payment by 80%, that looks like winning for us. And so, well, how are we going to do any of that stuff? So we need ideas. So the things at the bottom are ideas. And you can imagine these as things in your backlog. These could be features, it could be epics, it could be stories, whatever terminology you use to describe the ideas you have as solutions. So we're looking now at how do we achieve these key results? We need to have multiple ideas. If we only have one idea and that idea doesn't work, we're stuck. And so what's great about OKRs is they allow you to test your ideas. So let me walk you through this one. And this is in another talk that I've done before too. So this top half is the first key result and the bottom half is the second key result. And on the left is basically where we started. So we started with the time to complete payment was 5 minutes, and we're trying to get to 1 minute. And we call that an 80% reduction. You with me so far? You just type yes or no in the chat. I'll keep going. All right, thank you. Appreciate you going. So the bottom half, if we start with 100 enrollees and we're trying to double that, well, easy math, 200 enrollees. So if we find ourselves here, we're about 40% through with the quarter. And we realize that we're at 125 enrollees. How confident are we that we're going to meet the 200 enrollees by the end? Very confident, not very confident? All right, I'll take it. I'll take it. Also, there's no problem if y'all want your videos on. That way I could just see like a verbal, and you could use your hand, up, thumb, whatever. Okay, so not so confident on that. What about the other one? And I'll look at you, Gawain, because you're helping me out so far. If the top portion, yep, yeah, great. All right, thank you, John. So if the top portion is 80% to reduce payment, we've gone from 5 minutes to 2.5. Cool. We're halfway there, right? And we're not even halfway through the time box. So how confident are we feeling here? We thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways? Thumbs up. Yeah, looks good. Dave, I think I'm going to hold that one if it's okay. But do hold me to that, okay? Yeah, perfect. It's a great question. So, you know, there's more of a primer in another talk that I've given. I can share that video afterwards. So I lost my cursor. Hold on 1 second. So yeah, this is great. It looks like we're fairly healthy on the top. The other one doesn't look so healthy. So we're testing our hypothesis. Now, what if we told you that we take another piece of data? So we don't just take the data of the actual versus the target, where the target is 1 minute and the actual is 2.5 minutes. We also take something called confidence. So we ask the people doing the work how confident they are that they're going to hit this. And we ask this regularly of them. Well, they say, hey, look, we're only 30% confident we can get down to 1 minute. And actually what's going on here is we've squeezed most of the inefficient parts of this process out. Getting the rest is going to be really hard. And so you get a sense of how you're doing against this. And you might determine that 2.5 minutes is actually good enough. And maybe 1 minute was super ambitious. But 2.5 minutes actually would raise customer sat a bunch. And you'd have happy customers. So, you know, the same thing on the other one, the 80% confidence. Look, even though we only have 125 enrollees, we may have learned something amazing during this early part that now we understand exactly how to raise it and much quicker. So by the way we do the work and the way we get feedback, we can actually discover that even though the numbers, the actual numbers versus the target doesn't look very good, we have information, qualitative information that tells us we're actually on track. So we're probably feeling pretty good overall about the strategy and about our goal for the quarter. So one of the other great things here about strategy, if you've ever heard of the Conscious Leadership Group or seen or read the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders, they have this great drawing. Actually, there's a video. I want to say the video is 10 minutes. It could be 15, but they just draw a line. And they talk about leaders either being below the line or above the line. It's very simple. So they talk about conscious leaders. Conscious leaders are above the line. So you're trying to locate yourself. So if you're above the line, you're coming with this presence. I'm open, I'm curious, I'm committed to learning. So if a leader sees this data, right, and they're like really worried about it, instead of coming to the meeting asking about the results, worried about it, they could say, great, what are you learning about the inefficiencies in the process? What are you learning about how customers get incentivized to enroll for autopay? What are you learning about those kinds of things? That's a nice place to be, because it puts less pressure on the leader and also allows them to get more out of it. Because when you're focused on strategy, the leader doesn't need to have all the answers to everything. They allow the people doing the work to go learn, because everybody's aligned on what the strategy is, and everyone's aligned on what the goal, the measurable goal is. So what's great here is the leader just gets to be open, curious, and committed to learning. In the case where they're more focused on tactics, they're probably a little more, oh, you're doing it wrong. This is not how I do it. They might be more in that expert mindset, that expert mode that we looked at before. And when you're in this mode, it's hard to scale your leadership to an entire organization. You become the bottleneck, you become the authority, the one that knows how to do it best. You become committed more to being right. You become defensive, you become closed. Hey, I'm getting a little bit of sound going on, just some background sound. All right, I'm going to move on. So just by shifting to strategy, leaders can take a different stance that supports what they're trying to do. If they're down in tactics, they're going to be below the line, which is a more stressful, unhelpful place for them to be. And if we make this shift to strategy, our OKRs are going to look more like this. So we kept the same objective here, and we put some numbers with it. We said, well, look, the reason that we're trying to integrate this API into program offers is because we want to increase the number of actionable insights by 20%. We already have some information, but it's not very useful. So we want things we can act on. We're trying to run a business here. The second thing here is we say, well, look, what we're really after is we want to reduce the time it takes to make promotion adjustments. So we're doing promotions, and we do this for fixed periods of time, and we want to be able to make adjustments so that they're more effective. And if we could reduce the time it takes to do that, that'd be a huge win for marketing. So we're starting to reveal the intention of doing this work. And when people can connect to the purpose, they can connect to the attention, they can get additional ideas that they can bring. And you can have the power of multiple minds and multiple perspectives, and not just the leader. And when that happens, the leader starts to shift into this area, right? So they're evolving as a leader. They're moving into this achiever space where they start to focus a little bit more on strategy. So 35% of leaders polled are in this space. And the other thing that happens for leaders is they increase their effectiveness. So this is the universal model of leadership. And the one thing that you can't see in the middle is something called protecting. So that's a question I get a lot. The top half of this, as divided by this dashed line, is what's called creative competencies. These are the competencies that most correlate with effective leaders. And there's a whole database behind this. But when we talk about strategy and strategic focus, that's in this area of achieving. And achieving and relating are actually the two most important areas for leaders to do well. And they're most highly correlated with effective leaders. So a 1-to-1 correlation, a perfect correlation, would be a 1.0. This is a 0.91. So it's about as close to perfect as you can get. So leaders are increasing their effectiveness by making this change. A lot of goodness that comes out of it. All right, I'm going to speed up a little bit. And it seems like we've got a lot of OKR housekeeping to do. So second thing I talked about was increasing engagement for your organization. This is a real quote. So I brought OKRs to a group one time, and there was a product manager. And the product manager says, after a little while using this, "I hate how much I love this," she says to her boss. And that quote just like tickled me. I found that to be a great quote, because she realized this is actually helping her. She thought it was going to be just one more thing she had to do, one more piece of process. She thought it was going to slow her down. She thought, oh, great, now what are they bringing to me? I have enough things to do. But it actually helped change the way that she worked with her stakeholders. So OKRs done well can actually infuse energy. And that's a big deal, right? You want engagement, you got to think about energy. So how can leaders help? So this idea of conscious leaders, leaders that decide how they want to be in moments with their people. right? That are intentional and not just reactive. They don't just react to whatever's happening in the moment. These intentional or conscious leaders are masters at managing energy, right? And so they create cultures that are engaged, on purpose, clear, and a number of other things. So conscious leaders can employ OKRs to create purpose and get people engaged, right? Have them find energy out of that, where previously they may have had something they were struggling with. So use it to help them benefit. Much like strategy, engagement is one of those words we use that I'm not sure we all have the same understanding of. And so engagement really is an emotional state where we feel passionate, energetic, and committed, right? We bring our best selves, our hearts and minds are there. That's huge, huge, right? And again, this word energy appears. So I'm going to relay for you a situation where there was a manager of product managers. She was a director of several areas, and it's a common thing that comes up. So she had this situation where she was sort of wondering, like, well, I have 13 different teams and many different products within that. How many OKRs should I have? Right? I'm not sure. You know, if I have, let's say I have just 3 teams, should I have 1 OKR? Should I have several OKRs? Right? Should I have 1 OKR per team? Should I have shared ones? So there's a lot of decisions you need to make about figuring out what is people's focus, right? Where do you create engagement? How do you get people aligned to something that's important and meaningful for them, somehow ties to their work that they can relate to? And so this product manager wondered a few different things. She had just been through this org change. She had gotten a lot of the teams were the same, but there were some new teams that came on. And she was wondering to herself, look, how do these products fit together? And how do I make sense of this? Because if I can't, then how do I lead my people, right? How do I help them be the best they can be? And I'm also being asked to do this OKR work. And I'm like, well, how do I set goals and direction without a cohesive vision? And she knew too that this was an area that she was leading that wasn't the super exciting area that's doing the innovative technologies. It was the area of more kind of maintain the business. And the morale had been low for a while, right? People weren't getting as much budget. They didn't feel like they were getting to work on the cool things. And so she also had this need to boost morale. And so she was aware of all these things. And I thought that was really amazing. And so what did she do? Well, so she modeled clarity, kindness, and hope, which I shamelessly stole from Brene Brown, who has many amazing pearls of wisdom. But OKRs offer hope to people. It's the same as Agile does, because it becomes a new way of doing things where they can actually focus, where they don't feel as stressed. That might help them actually work better together. And her idea was to bring people together to help make sense of their organization. And she wanted to have them orient around their customers and discuss how each of them serve these customers. And so she brought them into a space and created a safe space for them to do this work. And so in doing this work, they decided, you know what, us as different teams, we share these customers. We do have some purpose here. We overlap. We have certain dependencies. And from this work, they were able to all get a sense of how they fit together and what was important to them. And so this leader did something really amazing by leaning into kind of a sense of curiosity and a need that she needed to have her people connect to each other, connect to purpose, to boost morale, to be successful with a number of different things. And they were able to consolidate into 3 distinct missions. They had these beautiful posters that I didn't get pictures of, and I probably wasn't allowed to anyways. But they were inspiring. And so they came away with a bunch of energy. And what was cool about this is this leader was really starting to shift into this catalyst area, right? Really starting to kind of now shift the culture a little bit from a culture of people that are more connected, that really do see their purpose, that are a little more excited to come to work. And she was doing this by leading with vision, right? She certainly came in with some thoughts, some ideas, but she also allowed herself to be influenced by the people in the room, right? And challenged them with powerful questions. And so you can use OKRs to start moving along this path and evolving as a leader. And if you do this, you're going to be even more effective. So as I said before, relating is the other category. And relating is all about connecting people together. It's fostering team play. It's caring connection about the people you have. It's developing the people you have. And so leaders that are good at both strategy, vision, and purpose, and also connecting people with each other and showing that you care, right? Getting them to collaborate in a safe space in a way that provides energy. This is a game changer. So the final piece I want to talk about with OKRs, and I'm going to try to get through this in 5 minutes. We'll see how I do, is to gain alignment with peers and direct reports. So one of the toughest things with OKRs, you first introduce them, and what ends up happening is you have to align with each other. So you have to align both vertically, so that's up and down, right? Annual and quarterly, but also side to side, because there's often teams that some teams are shared teams among many. Some teams are just highly coupled together. And if they each independently create something, but depend on the other person, they're not going to succeed. And so we do have to have agreement about things. So one of the things that comes up when you introduce OKRs is that same woman I was telling you about, she had a counterpart in engineering. And so engineering goes, it's great that you're using OKRs to define product goals, but we want to use them for technology work too. So what happens is everyone wants to start using them for their own reasons. And so when we talk about alignment here, another definition for alignment is that you're trying to get people pulling in the same direction, or in this case, horses. So Mary Beth O'Neill, who this quote comes from, wrote a book called Executive Coaching with Backbone and Heart. And she talks about addressing both conflict, which is managing different perspectives, and authority, managing who decides. And this what's difficult about alignment for leaders is you have to be good at both. And often leaders, like I'll just say humans, don't like conflict and avoid it quite a bit. So going back to the story, what these two people ended up doing, they were basically peers. And rather than have two different OKRs, they said, well, what if we merge these, right? What if rather, like, your technology work is great and our product goals are great too. But what's going to happen is we're going to confuse the teams, and they're not going to know which one to do. And they're going to try to do both, and they're going to be frustrated, and maybe neither one of us succeeds. So let's combine them instead. And so that was pretty good, except for one thing. There was a group that was not super excited about some of the technology changes, because it meant that they were going to shift to a new system. And they had promised their customers a bunch of things that they really needed. And they knew how to do that in the old system. They didn't want to have to wait forever for the new system to be built. And so this group, the leaders really had to kind of deal with that and say, look, okay, there's an impact here. We should talk with them. This is a big decision we're making about these OKRs, including the technology change. We need to go get alignment. And so there's a 3-step process for alignment. The first is to create collective clarity. The second, acknowledge team reactions. And the third is to get a plan for commitment. And so the first one is the leader has to provide clarity. The leader describes the decision, and they have to be very specific about what the decision is. And then they need to be quiet and ask the team to paraphrase. So you want to hear from the team. What did you hear? What are your assumptions? And then the leader's job is just to confirm their understanding or correct it if there's an assumption they made that's not true. No defensiveness, just correct, right? So you're looking for people to all have an understanding of what the decision is. And the goal is for the leader to know that the team understands, because when people don't understand, they walk away with different ideas, and they don't really fully support something that you need their full energy to get behind. And the leader should be able to describe anything that the team initially misunderstood. So there's a lesson here for the leader in their communication. Second piece, they need to acknowledge the team reaction. So like, look, okay, now that we all understand what the decision is, I want to hear from you. What's your reaction to that? And so you're looking for professional people, but honest people, right? So not judgmental, but you need them to be specific and descriptive. Well, it's okay, but I have these reservations about it. Great. And so then the leader needs to paraphrase. Here's what I'm hearing you say. Is that right? Because the leader also might misunderstand what people say. And the leader needs to describe how hearing this has been helpful. You want people to feel safe, have psychological safety, that they can give a true reaction without it coming back to haunt them later. So this is super important. It means the leader can't become defensive when they hear something they don't like, right? They can't just associate their pride and their identity and their self-worth with people's reactions to it. You have to know it's just human nature. And the last thing we need to do is understand people's reservations to commitment. So I use the fist to 5 here to say, you know, is it kind of over my dead body with a fist, or, you know, I'm good with it. And there's layers of gray, you know, shades of gray in between. And so, great, you find out people have reservations or they don't. If they have reservations, they fall into typically 3 categories. Cultural hesitation. Well, we've never done it this way. This feels awkward. I'm scared of it. And if that's the case, you know, we'll treat it one way. We'll just have the leader lead the shift in behavior. Hey, look, I know it's really natural to feel this way. I know it's going to feel kind of awkward. So I appreciate that everybody's going to be doing this work, and I'm going to lead by example, and I'm going to help you through this, but we are going to take this path, right? So if that's what the reservation is, that's how the leader should respond. Now, if the leader is, oh, crap, there's a big problem here. There's a threat to success. You need to be open to influence. And so you don't want to be stubborn here. You want to listen to your people, and you want to invite them to influence you and maybe even help solve the problem. And so that's huge. When you show that you're open to influence, now you don't want to be wishy-washy, but really open to influence for a good reason. That's pretty powerful, opening the connection between an organization and its leader. Now, occasionally you're going to just find people that just like, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm close to retirement, I don't feel like it, or you know, I'm not in a good place, I'm not excited about this. It's you know, whatever issues people have, you just need to address those privately. And so again here, you know, what you're doing by inviting conflict and handling it skillfully is you're getting more comfortable. You're getting more open and curious, and you're not getting so tight and defensive that you're worried about what they're going to say, or you're reacting to something you didn't want to hear, right? So you're shifting to above the line, and you're really now kind of digging into a culture where people can be honest and they can be productive together, and they can manage conflict skillfully. And so I'll end on this. I know I'm a couple minutes late, and then we'll start hitting questions. So in order to be effective as an organization, you need more leaders who really show these effective behaviors, these creative competencies, this shift into Catalyst. You need them to do this more consistently. If they do it half the time and the other half the time they fall into more of a reactive kind of below the line mode, it cancels each other out. And so you want people that can more consistently become effective leaders. And when this happens, leadership becomes a competitive advantage. And so OKRs require change, and leaders must meet the challenge. So accept you have a role and strategy, work to develop it, tend to your people, provide clarity, purpose, and connection with each other, and act diligently to gain alignment on important decisions so that you don't have active or passive resistance. Right? And if you do that, you might meet this definition. And if you want to learn more, you can read any of these. And this is me if you want to connect. And I'll stop there.
Mark, thanks. There is 1 or 2 questions here, one of which you said, hold me to it. So I'm going to hold you to it.
Yep.
When authoring KRs at the beginning, how do you translate the numerical objective to a numerical KR? This is from Dave B.
Is he allowed to come off mute?
Sure.
Okay. So Dave, what do you mean when you say a numerical objective?
You know, so I think you had an example on there, if you go back in your slides, but you had like the objectives had like maybe a flat value, and then the other maybe was a percentage, and then there's key results, I guess.
Here's one.
But you're supposed to, I think, come up with these things normally at the beginning, but it's kind of hard to do that.
For sure.
So if you get a number where you want to, like, I don't know, increase something by 20, maybe increase revenue or something by 20%, but you have to then translate that into a key result, where you're going to have to come up with another number. But it's not easy to come up with a number in your key result or more detail in order to make that objective to become true.
Well, so a couple of things I want to say on this, and really this isn't I have another talk that's more of a primer for OKRs, but the objective doesn't usually have numbers. It's just a phrase, right? Like integrate whatever into whatever. So from there, there are no numbers at the objective level. So this top portion here that you're seeing next to the target, the bullseye, that's the
Was there one
that's the
after
objective.
this? Was there an example that was maybe slightly later
Probably
with numbers like metrics?
Well, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes. Let's see how quickly I can get to it. You were looking at this, maybe, or no?
I think it might have been before this. Was there one before this or two before this?
Well, there was this one that had no numbers, and just the one I showed you a minute ago, which was this one. Those are the only ones.
Oh,
Yeah. So let me leave you with a couple things. And by the way, you can reach out to me offline, and if you want to have more of a discussion on this, I'm happy to do it. Because I'm not sure I'll be able to get to your full satisfaction during the time we've got, and I want to make sure to hit the other questions. But let me just say this: it is hard when you first start using OKRs. It is hard, and there are this thing that says increase actionable insights by 20%. That's a relative term, right? Because by 20%, you need to know what the today is. Otherwise, you can't know what 20% greater is. So there is some work you've got to do there to convert relative numbers like this relative to what, and then you convert them to an actual. But you just do that so you can do the tracking, and the idea of what to measure and what the target should look like is a process you go through that's super uncomfortable for people. But really, I think the idea is to just get started with it and say, hey, if we go ahead.
I'd say, like, one of the biggest questions that the teams have is you wind up, so you're at the team level, but you have this sort of strategy, theme, or initiative value. So that's probably somebody in the business that's coming up with like an objective and possibly like a percentage or a flat value. And it's pretty difficult to necessarily like tie the team to that objective with some numerical metric. It's hard to translate that, like what you're doing at the team level to, let's say, the enterprise level.
So there's a lot to unpack in what you said, and I don't think we should unpack it further. But let me just say that what I'm reading into this is there are some assumptions, or maybe they're just what's happening in your world. But the OKRs that you create should be relevant to the team or teams that are working on them. They should connect well to the types of work they do, and often they should be involved in the process. So they're not just handed to them. They have some say. And so when you mention the business, I think a lot about whoever the product person is, but I'm thinking about organizations where there's a lot of either product owners that are agile, or maybe they're called product managers. And there's this relationship with the team and the person in charge of the product that represents the business or the customers. And so they should be talking with each other a lot and choosing things that are achievable and relevant and make an impact. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. There's probably more there, but again, you can connect with me, and if you want to have a further discussion, I'm open to it.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. There are other questions. I know some.
There is one more question, and this is Meenakshi. So Meenakshi, maybe you can help clarify. How would one communicate with the leaders that 2.5% is the 80% Pareto rule? The rest of the gains may not be worth the effort.
Just like that. I'm just kidding. Like, what are you seeing as the challenge here?
Communication, really. Like, a lot of times leadership is used to that pass or fail mindset.
Yes, right? yes, that's huge, right? Okay, so I got you.
Speaking to that, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, good question. So, again, look, all this stuff is change, and change is hard. So guess what? We need to get into the hard stuff. If we don't get into the hard stuff, we don't grow and change. So here, what we've got to do is say, we have to start creating ambitious goals. Now, we might not do this from the outset because we may have teams that are they have a little bit of PTSD, right? They may have this mentality you're talking about may have happened to them, where they're getting graded on something, and so they may not be willing to create ambitious goals to start with. But the example I gave is more the case where when you're creating ambitious goals and you're really saying, this is our intention, and we think it would be amazing if we could do this. The idea behind it is with OKRs, you're integrating them into some routines you've got. So if you have Scrum teams, I would integrate this into the sprint reviews, and I would be talking about this every 2 weeks. And if my confidence changed on something or my numbers changed on something, I would start offering this up. And I find what's really powerful about this is what you're doing is you're allowing people to make more frequent decisions. You're saying, look, here's a decision you can make. We can keep going, right? We're only 40% through the time box, but we suspect it's going to be really hard to get the rest of this out. Do you want to continue to spend the money on this? That's the question. So it just becomes a choice that they have got. So you offer them the choice and see what they do with it. Now, if you reach the end of the time box and they didn't make it and people start getting beat up, that's a different conversation. But that now becomes a conversation in today's world where they're wondering why they have such a hiring problem or retention problem, and they spend all their time in interviews instead of doing the job that they're hired to do. Right? So that has a way of working itself out if it goes wrong.
Thank you. That was great. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, I think that covers all the questions. Mark, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Sure.
Really insightful and interesting information. Hopefully everybody got as much out of that as I did. And thank you also to everybody on the call for your participation today. Really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.